They call it luck. They say you're just naturally good at reading people, that things just happen to fall into place for you. But you know better. You're not loud, you're not aggressive, and yet you always see the move before it's made. You walk into rooms and feel the tension others ignore. You pick up what they miss. You make decisions that seem instinctive, but they're not. They're surgical, calculated, quiet. You outsmart most people without even trying, and Machiavelli would have seen you for what you are, the most dangerous kind of intelligent. The smartest person in the room is never the one talking the most. You know this instinctively. While others scramble to impress, to be seen, to fill the silence with words, you sit back, you watch, you listen. You catalogue everything. The nervous twitch in their jaw, the false laughter, the way someone's eyes avoid the truth. You don't need to dominate a room, you absorb it. That's your power. You wait until the temperature shifts, until someone reveals their fear, until the subtle hierarchy exposes itself, and by then, you already know who's pretending to lead and who's actually in control. You're not passive, you're precise. While they perform, you're collecting data. Every word, every look, every careless slip of emotion, you catch it. And that's the difference. Most people rush to speak because they're afraid of being forgotten. You wait because you know timing is leverage. They confuse silence for shyness. But silence is your shield, your sword, your strategy. It's the reason why when you finally do speak, people stop. They listen. Not because you're loud, but because they know you don't waste breath. You've studied them first, their weaknesses, their lies, their desires, and when you respond, it's not to join the noise. It's to end it. This is why you outsmart them without even trying. Because while they were speaking just to hear themselves, you already finished the game 3 moves ago. You never ask questions just to be polite. You ask to corner the truth. Most people ask what they think they're supposed to. Ask surface level things that maintain the illusion of connection. But you cut straight to the hinge, the one pressure point that opens the entire system. You ask questions that make people pause, that make them shift in their chair, blink a little too long, or suddenly get quiet. You don't ask 5 questions to get to the point. You ask one that gets there instantly, and that's what unnerves them. Because most of them aren't used to being seen that fast. You don't ask to fill space. You ask to expose patterns, intentions, weaknesses. Most people want to be understood. You want to understand. That's why you see through them before they even know they're performing. You hear a sentence and you already know what they're hiding behind it. You let them speak, then ask the one thing they hoped no one would notice. And you do it without cruelty. Just clarity. You don't need confrontation. You only need precision. And Machiavelli would have approved, because the art of ruling minds begins not with answers, but with the questions you know how to ask. They'll call you intense, cold, maybe even calculating. But what they're really saying is that you made them feel seen in a way they didn't expect or want. Your intelligence isn't loud, it's surgical. You cut straight to the center and leave no blood on the floor. You outsmart people not with arguments, but with awareness. While they're still explaining, you're already adjusting your strategy. They argue. You learn. They defend. You adapt. And in the end, they talk themselves into corners while you walk out with the blueprint to their mind. You don't need to outtalk anyone. You only need to ask the right question, once. Most people are addicted to compliments. You're not. Where others hear praise and feel validation, you hear intent. You see what's behind the words. You know that flattery is often just a mask, a tool of influence, a trade for access, a soft bribe dressed as admiration. And while others absorb it blindly, You measure it. You replay it in your head, not to feel good, but to decode what they want. Because compliments are rarely just compliments. They're positioning, bait, strategy. That's why you don't melt when someone tells you you're impressive. You wonder why they said it now, and not before. You wonder what they're about to ask next. You wonder who they gave the same compliment to last week. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Most people crave approval so deeply that they'll kneel for anyone who offers it. You don't, and that's why you're dangerous. You're immune to the one thing that manipulates almost everyone else. They call you cold because you don't light up when praised. But it's not that you reject kindness, it's that you know the difference between genuine admiration and weaponized validation. You've seen how easily people become loyal to those who praise them, and you've seen how quickly that loyalty gets used against them. But you don't play that game. You don't need to be told you're valuable to know that you are, and that internal stability makes you impossible to control. You outsmart people because you're not trying to win their approval. You're trying to understand their angle. And the second someone realizes their praise has no power over you, they either panic or retreat. Because you're not the kind of person who can be seduced by words. You want to see actions, consistency, tension. You want to see how someone behaves when the mask slips. Compliments mean nothing to you if they're not followed by integrity. And that's what separates you from most. Machiavelli would have called it clarity, the ability to hear sweet words without falling asleep to danger, to smile without surrendering your perception, to know when a compliment is a dagger with perfume on the blade. Most don't see it, but you do, and that's why you stay 3 steps ahead. You don't force connection, you mirror it, without effort, without even thinking. You match people's tone, energy, rhythm, not to gain approval, but to gain information. People reveal themselves when they feel safe, and nothing makes them feel safer than being around someone who feels familiar. That's what you become, familiar, reflective. You make people feel seen without ever showing them your full reflection. And that's where your power lies. You adapt, not to blend in, but to watch how they behave when they think no one's watching. You shift your presence like water, calm when needed, sharp when necessary, and people underestimate what you're doing because it looks natural. You lean when they lean. You echo their phrases. You mirror their expressions. You become a version of them so subtle they don't even notice they're opening up to someone they barely know. That's the beauty of it. While they think they're leading the conversation, you're steering it. While they feel comfortable, you're analyzing. Their stories, their gestures, their inconsistencies, you track them all. Not to attack, but to understand. And the more they reveal, the more leverage you gain. Most people speak to impress. You listen to assess. They overshare without realizing why. They laugh a little too hard, confess a little too soon. And by the time they pause to wonder why they're being so open with you, it's too late. You've already mapped their behavior. You've already identified their fears, their tells, their angles. They think you're just naturally easy to talk to. But the truth is, you know exactly how to disarm them without ever raising a weapon. That's why Machiavelli would have approved. Because what you've mastered is not manipulation, it's observation at the level of art. You let them build the bridge. You just walk across it. Quietly. They won't know what you're doing, until the room has cleared and they're left wondering why they said so much. And even then, they'll call it chemistry. You'll call it strategy. You don't need to experience every failure yourself to understand it. You learn by watching others lose. You listen when people think no one's paying attention. You study mistakes like most people study success carefully, without judgment, but with full awareness of the consequences. When someone falls apart in public, you don't look away. You watch how it unravels, what they ignored, what they overestimated, what they said right before the collapse. That's your edge. Most people only learn when life breaks them open, but you're different. You watch others burn and take notes on the smoke. You don't need to touch the fire to know its scars. You outsmart most people not by being lucky or even brilliant, but by refusing to repeat the lessons already paid for by someone else. You collect warnings, not wounds. You replay conversations that weren't yours. You remember betrayals you never experienced. And still, you move as if you had. That's what people don't get. They think wisdom only comes from pain you personally endured. But Machiavelli would disagree. He would say, the wisest rulers are those who learn from other people's suffering and use it as insulation. You see it the same way. When a friend gets too comfortable and it costs them, you file it away. When a co-worker trusts too quickly, or argues too emotionally, or reveals too much too soon, you remember. Not to mock, but to avoid. You don't need to win every fight. You just need to know how they're lost. That's what sets you apart. Most people walk into the same trap 5 times before they recognize it. You spot it from across the room and take a different door. And because you learn in silence, no one notices the shift. You never need to announce what you've figured out. You just move smarter, quieter, more efficiently. You let other people take the hits, not out of cruelty, out of discipline. Because you know survival isn't about proving yourself in every storm. It's about knowing which ones to sit out, which ones to study from afar, and when to step in only after the damage is done. You're not afraid of learning. You're just wise enough not to make every mistake yourself, and that makes you a threat, a quiet one. The kind people never see coming until they realize you've already avoided the trap they're still sinking into. You don't speak just to fill the air. When you open your mouth, it's intentional, measured, precise. While others pour out words like loose change, you treat your voice like a blade, drawn only when necessary, and sharp enough to silence the room. That's what makes your intelligence different. It's not just in what you know, but in what you choose to say. You understand that the louder someone talks, the more likely they are to give something away, their insecurity, their need for validation, their desperation to be right. But you don't need volume, you don't need speed. You use silence like a scalpel, and your words carry weight because you don't waste them. People feel it when you speak. It lands harder. It echoes longer. And it's not because you're trying to impress anyone. It's because you've been listening, calculating, and waiting for the exact moment when your voice changes the direction of the room. You don't interrupt. You strike. And when you do, it's often with a single sentence that ends the entire conversation. That unnerves people. They expect intelligence to be loud, showy, performative. But yours is subtle, cold, unshakable. You don't need to convince. You don't need to explain. You don't need to win the debate, because by the time you speak, the decision has already been made. That's what Machiavelli would have respected, not the noise, but the precision, the way you can dismantle a lie with one line, the way your silence pressures people more than any rant could, the way you look at someone and they start rethinking everything they just said. You don't speak often, but when you do, it changes something. It shifts the air. It makes people check their posture. That's power. Not because you demand attention, but because you command it without trying. And when people ask why you're so quiet, you never give them the real answer. Because the truth is, you're not quiet. You're dangerous. You're deliberate. You're already 5 layers deep in strategy while they're still speaking on impulse. You don't need to raise your voice. You raise the stakes, And when you speak, people listen not out of politeness, but because they know your words don't come lightly. They come like a verdict. And most people aren't ready for it. They think you're naive, harmless, maybe even a little slow. You let them think that. You let them misread your silence as hesitation, your calm as inexperience, your lack of reaction as weakness. It's one of your oldest strategies, the art of being underestimated. Because while they're underestimating you, they're exposing themselves. You've seen it time and time again. The louder ones take over. The arrogant ones assume control. And the moment they decide you're not a threat, they drop their guard. That's when you start moving, quietly, efficiently, without alerting anyone. You're not in a rush to prove yourself, because you know real power doesn't need recognition to exist. It moves in the background. It studies. It prepares. And that's exactly what you do. While they're busy trying to impress, dominate, or lead, you're noticing who they're trying to please, what they're avoiding, where their fear shows. They don't realize you're learning the map to their behavior while they're still performing. And by the time they finally see you, it's too late, because you're already in position. You already understand how to dismantle their arguments, how to redirect their energy, how to win without confrontation. You're not passive, you're patient. You don't resist being underestimated because it's your camouflage. Your power lives in the blind spot of their arrogance, and that's what makes it effective. They think they're ahead, but they're only louder. They think they're in control, but they're only distracted. You let them talk. You let them take the lead. You let them bury themselves in their own ego. Then, when it matters, you move, and you don't miss. Machiavelli would have called it elegant cruelty. Not the kind that harms recklessly, but the kind that allows fools to undo themselves while you stand still. You've mastered the discipline of restraint, and most people have no idea how lethal that can be. They assume danger looks like sharp teeth and raised voices. But with you, danger looks like silence. It looks like someone who smiles, listens, and waits. Someone who doesn't reveal their hand until the entire game is over. And even then, you say nothing, you just let the results speak. Because the moment they finally realize who you are, the one they ignored, dismissed, laughed off, it's not just surprising, it's devastating. You don't explain yourself. Not because you have something to hide, but because you understand what most people never do, that explanations are invitations. Invitations for judgment, for distortion, for power to shift out of your hands. Every time someone begs to be understood, they give up a piece of their control. They offer their reasons like apologies, hoping it softens the blow or earns approval. But you've seen what that leads to. The more you explain, the more people twist your words, question your motives, drag your truth into their frame. So you stopped. You let them wonder. You let them assume. You let the silence fill in the blanks however they want. Because the moment you stop trying to be understood is the moment you become untouchable. You walk away when questioned. You smile when accused. You say less when provoked, and it drives people mad. They want access. They want a confession. They want something they can grab onto, even if it's just your reasoning. But you give them nothing. Not out of cruelty, but out of discipline. Because you know your value doesn't live in their approval. It lives in your restraint, in your refusal to explain what doesn't need to be justified. People think silence is weakness, but in your case, it's precision, it's power. It's the choice to stay above the emotional games others are still addicted to. They think they're pulling you in, but you're already gone. You outsmart them by staying unreadable, by never showing them where your buttons are, by refusing to hand them the script to your mind. That's what Machiavelli would respect. Not just your intelligence, but your discipline. The way you let people chase ghosts instead of facts. The way you protect your peace, not by defending it, but by never putting it on trial. Because the moment you explain, you give them a lever, and you don't hand out levers. You let people make their assumptions, then you use those assumptions to move quietly, strategically, without resistance. That's how you win. Not by defending yourself, but by staying far enough ahead that you never have to. You know how to play dumb. Not because you are, but because intelligence without camouflage is a target. You've seen what happens to people who reveal too much too soon. They're challenged, resented, isolated, or quietly sabotaged. So you stop doing that. You let others believe you didn't catch the insult. You let them think their manipulation worked. You pretend not to notice the power play forming in the corner of the room. You slow down your speech, soften your gaze, and lower your presence, all by design. Because sometimes the smartest thing you can do is act like you're not. That's how you stay underestimated. That's how you gather more than they meant to give. When people think they're smarter than you, they relax. They get sloppy. They speak without filters. They show you their moves before they even make them. And you let them. You let them walk into the trap they think you can't see. That's your advantage, not just your intelligence, but your ability to hide it until it's useful. Most people need recognition. They need to be known as clever, strong, insightful. You don't. You only need the outcome. You don't care if they think you're slow, distracted, confused, as long as they reveal themselves first. And they always do. Because pride talks, arrogance performs, and when you make yourself small, egos swell to fill the space. That's when people show you their true intentions. You've used this in rooms with leaders, liars, lovers, enemies. You've seen people burn themselves trying to prove they're above you, and the whole time you were only giving them rope. Machiavelli would have called it calculated humility, the art of stepping back, not because you can't lead, but because letting others feel dominant is often more useful than dominance itself. You outsmart people not just with knowledge, but with patience. You don't need to shine in every moment. You need to win in the right one. And sometimes that means playing the fool, because the real fool is the one who thinks the game is over just because you haven't started playing yet. You don't need to win arguments. That's what separates you. Most people fight to be right. You redirect to get results. While they waste energy proving their point, you shift the direction of the room without them even noticing. You've learned that arguing is often a trap, a theatre of pride and noise where the loudest wins nothing but ego points. But you're not interested in ego. You're interested in leverage, control, outcomes. So you don't argue. You adjust. You watch where their energy is going and subtly reroute it. You don't raise your voice, you reposition the conversation. You don't fight for credit. You make sure you get the win behind closed doors. That's your skill. While others battle in daylight, you conquer in shadows. You let them think they've won the point, while you win the direction. You nod when needed. You let them feel smart, feel loud, feel heard. Because you know most people don't want truth, they want to feel superior. You give them that feeling. Then you steer things your way once they've burned out. It's a psychological judo move. You don't meet force with force. You redirect it. That's what Machiavelli would call a higher form of intelligence, the ability to guide the herd without ever appearing to lead it. You've sat through long debates, knowing you already had the outcome in hand. You've agreed to things publicly, only to shift the terms subtly later. You've let people win the argument while you walked away with the real prize. That's not deception, it's discipline. Because you know that energy spent on being right is energy taken from being effective. You choose effectiveness. You don't need applause for the win. You just want the win. Most people don't see it. They think you're passive, but you're not. You're surgical. You choose your battles like a strategist, not a brawler. You don't need to shout to move a room. You just need to know when to stay silent, when to agree, and when to quietly reposition the pieces. While they're fighting over words, you're already 5 steps ahead in outcomes. That's not luck. That's design. And when they finally notice you got what you wanted without ever arguing for it, it's already done. You spot the power play before it's even made. Most people only notice manipulation when they're already wrapped in it. You feel it approaching. The tone shift, the sudden warmth in someone's voice, the timing of a compliment, the way a question is phrased, like a favor but shaped like a trap. You don't need to see the move. You feel the intention. And that's the difference. While others are still reacting to what's being said, you're already dissecting why it's being said and what it's meant to cause. You've trained your mind to look past the surface. You don't get flattered easily, pressured quickly, or pushed emotionally. Because you know the oldest tools of control are not force, they're guilt, urgency, inclusion, silence, and they don't work on you. Someone tries to make you feel responsible for their feelings, and you feel the tug, but you don't move. Someone tries to get you to act fast before you think, and you slow down. Someone tries to isolate you, then offer themselves as your only option, and you widen your circle instead. That's how you stay above it. Not by resisting every influence, but by seeing the game before it's played. That's the edge most people never develop, the ability to read patterns before they become obvious. To sense what's being tested, what's being pushed, what's being built in silence. You don't just listen to words, you listen to strategy. You listen to the emotional setup. You notice who's watching when something is said, who benefits, who stays quiet. Machiavelli would have called this the highest form of intelligence, the kind that doesn't need confrontation to win, just recognition, just quiet redirection. You don't blow up the strategy, you quietly walk around it. You change your availability, you stop revealing. You let them wonder why their games don't work on you, and they never get the answer. Because while they were planning to influence, manipulate, or dominate, you were already out of reach. Not because you're cold, but because you're aware. You don't fight the game, you just stop playing it, and that's why you win. You know how to be liked without ever being fully available. That's the paradox most people never figure out. They chase attention, flood conversations, try to be everywhere all the time, and in doing so, they dilute themselves. But not you. You've learned that presence is only powerful when it's rare. You give people just enough, a moment of eye contact, a perfectly timed word, a silence that makes them lean in. And then you pull back. You don't flood the room with your energy. You let people come to you. That's not shyness. That's control. You've mastered the art of subtle distance, the kind that builds curiosity instead of resentment. The kind that makes people wonder what you're thinking, where you've been, why they want more from you than you're offering. You never overshare. You never overstay. You arrive with impact, then vanish with grace. And that's why your presence lingers longer than anyone else's. Because while others exhaust their charm, you ration yours. You keep something back, something private, something sacred. You understand that mystery is magnetic, that boundaries create tension, that not everyone deserves full access to your energy, your story, your time. People don't know why they feel pulled to you, they just do. They remember how you made them feel, even if you said almost nothing. They remember the weight of your silence, the sharpness of your insight, the calm confidence of someone who never begs to be liked. And that's what Machiavelli would respect: the ability to influence without being dependent, to be wanted without being desperate, to attract without chasing. You don't need to be the most talkative. You just need to be the most disciplined. You know when to disappear. You know when to turn down the volume. You know that when everyone else is loud, silence becomes a signal, not of absence but of control. That's why people wonder about you. That's why they notice when you're gone. Because you've trained them not to expect you always, and in doing so, you've made your attention worth more. You outsmart people not just by knowing more, but by giving less. And what you give, always deliberate, always unforgettable. You never needed to outsmart them. They outsmarted themselves trying to keep up with you. That's the final move. You never played louder, never made threats, never bragged or warned. You simply moved in silence. Let them make their assumptions. Let them play the game they thought you were too naive to understand. And they walked right into their own trap. Because the truth is, people expose themselves when they think you're not a threat. They talk too much. They plot too soon. They underestimate the quiet one. But you were listening. You were watching. You let them write the whole script while you studied the ending. You don't win by outshining people. You win by letting them think you're not even playing. That's what Machiavelli knew: power is never in the obvious move. It's in the setups, in the restraint, in the final act, when the opponent realizes they were performing for someone who never clapped. Most people lose because they try too hard to be impressive. They reveal their tactics too early. They argue to be seen. They flex to be feared. You do none of that. You move like smoke. You disappear from battles that drain energy. You nod during conversations that go nowhere. You agree when it benefits you. You stay silent when they expect reaction. And all the while, you're 3 steps ahead, letting them build their illusions, their confidence, their false sense of control, until it breaks. And when it breaks, they think it happened suddenly. They think you got lucky. But nothing about it was luck. It was design. They gave themselves away. You simply let them. That's the difference. You don't need to conquer loudly. You let people unravel in the space your silence creates. They chase your attention. They try to provoke your reaction. They get loud, desperate, unstable, and you remain still. By the time they realize what you are, they've already lost. Because the people who outsmart the world rarely look like the ones they look like you: calm, patient, quiet, until the final moment. And then suddenly, everything shifts. Not because you attacked, but because they played themselves. And you never even had to touch the board. If you saw yourself in these signs, you're not just thinking differently, you're moving strategically. Machiavelli would have smiled at that. For more dark psychology, silent power, and mind games they'll never see coming, like and subscribe. And if you've ever been underestimated, tell us in the comments how you flipped the game without ever raising your voice.